pay attention to the universe. I think it's really important to have plans, actually, to not just like wing it all the time. You have to be flexible at the plans, have maybe a very concrete plan, and be willing to leave any part of it. But then pay attention to the universe and see what it's trying to tell you.
Welcome to the 440 Podcast, where we explore the business of music, education, entrepreneurship, and building a creative life you love. I'm your host, Eric Branner, musician, educator, and founder of Fonz. Today's guest is a friend and one of the leading innovators in arts entrepreneurship, Dr. David Cutler. David is a composer, author, and distinguished professor of music entrepreneurship and innovation at the University of South Carolina. His acclaimed books, The Game of Innovation, The Savvy Music Teacher, and The Savvy Musician 2.0, have become essential resources for musicians and creative entrepreneurs looking to amplify their income, impact, and inspiration. Beyond writing, David leads immersive innovation games, team-based experiences that help artists, educators, and organizations solve creative challenges through collaboration. He's a dynamic thinker and practitioner who has reshaped how musicians approach entrepreneurship, innovation, and career design. David, thank you so much for being here. I'm so pumped to talk with you. It's been a while. I'm really grateful you're here. How are you doing?
Great. Well, I love every conversation we've had. They all are still in my mind, and just such great energy comes out of it. So thank you for the chance to chat some more.
Yeah, you know what? Just for fun, let's go down that memory lane. I remember first seeing you as a keynote speaker, I believe it was at MTNA. Must have been, 8 years ago?
It's a while ago. Yeah.
And you blew me away, and then we introduced ourselves and we connected. And
you blew me away. I still remember going to this like high top table and just having this great conversation and loving the energy and the creativity that you were bringing.
And then we went to the Savvy Music Venture Challenge, which you invited me to, which was an unbelievable experience. And I don't know if those are still happening, but can you want to explain just quickly about what that was?
Yeah, so I run lots of innovation games for different industries in the arts, education, and business sectors. But Savvy Arts Venture Challenge was a week-long innovation game where we would bring together a diverse group of people, different disciplines, different backgrounds, but all hopefully super positive and wanting to make a difference through the arts. And then they would play this very intense, immersive game throughout the week where they're trying to solve some problem related to the arts and entrepreneurship. So when you were there, the point of the teams, the challenge was to build an entrepreneurial arts venture that made a significant impact in the world around you. And so you're working on one of, I think we had maybe 8-10 teams, something like that were working on these competing projects and going in so many different exciting directions.
Yeah, and it was intense. We were in these groups and it was serious. We were up till like 3 working on these projects. And then during the day,
that's true.
You had these we all bought into it so much, and we were exploring your town, and really, and the friendships we made there, we all keep up. I still see everybody that was there at conferences, and we talk about it all the time. And I believe the organization that we started, Girls March, I believe that's still going. I think that's still actually a existing organization that came out of that week. So anyway, we
was a winner that year, by the way. So very exciting. And yeah, amazing project. We had this saying, we're going to work you harder than you ever worked before, but we're going to treat you better than you've ever been treated. And we pulled out all of the stops, but it's hard to be an artist. It's hard to be an entrepreneur. And so we wanted to get as much as we could out of that week, both in terms of the product, whatever the teams were developing, the process, so that you could use these problem-solving concepts and apply them to other parts of your life. And of course, this amazing network of just great change agents and beautiful human beings.
With the great Lance LaDuke, rest in peace, which was, that was where we met him too, who was a great friend. So you all did something really special there. And then after that journey, I became a huge fan of your Savvy Music Teacher book. And as we were developing Fonz, that became something that we baked a lot of those ideas into the platform because it made so much sense. You and I really vibed on this idea of entrepreneurial spirit, creative ways to solve problems, but also embracing that as a musician, right? And you were super hot on that, and we really super vibed on it. And so that book became a major recommendation to people who were coming to the platform to say, hey, you might want to think about if you're going to make this shift, why don't you consider these different ways to look at your career because you can do it. And you already said it once, it's hard, right? And you have to embrace it. And I'm going to interweave our conversation with your new book, which there will also be a link to that in the notes. There's so many wonderful things about it, but I really took away, and what really resonated with me right now is that section where you said there's two kinds of people. There's people that do it, and there's
Yeah.
people that don't. And
People
this
that
is,
get stuff done and people that can't get stuff done. Yeah.
yeah, you get stuff done or you don't get stuff done. And one of those things is adopting this mindset. And I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing. And that brings us up to now. So what's going on now?
So many things. But one big project I'm really proud of is that this book right here, The Savvy Musician 2.0, just was released. So my first book was actually called The Savvy Musician. Before The Savvy Music Teacher, I wrote something called The Savvy Musician, which at the time that came out was really the first book focused on innovative entrepreneurial careers in this particular way. It wasn't just about the business of music, the music industry. It was about the whole career model and the whole impact model and the likes. So it had been a minute since that came out, and it was finally time to update that or something. And so when I started, I thought I was going to write a second edition, and quickly learned that the world has changed so dramatically. All the rules are different, or many of the rules are different now. And furthermore, I had grown so much. I wrote that before running any of these games and the likes. And so I had learned so much from that and ultimately decided to just write a totally new book. So the Savvy Musician 2.0 is more of a sequel than an addition.
And just a real quick side note, in your process, you put out all this output, all these ideas and this work. And how do you, and you're all over the place and you consistently put out work. What's your process of writing another book? Is it just time? Do you write every day? Can you speak to that really quickly?
I get into periods where, like, now I'm working on another book project. And so I am writing pretty much every day, but you get really in this project or really in that project. I can tell you my first book took me 5 years to come out, and Savvy Musician, Savvy Music Teacher was 3 years. The book after that, Game of Innovation, which is up there, that took me 2 years. So I'm getting a little faster. And I always think I'm going to just knock this one out. And then it winds up taking longer than I thought because it just takes a long time to do it. But I got some great advice from someone, which was, when writing a book, the first thing you should do, write the back cover and write the table of contents. And so that has really helped me figure out, what is the form of this and how is it going to be laid out? It always is changing. And so, for example, that table of contents, I probably have 50 versions of it over time. But to really think about how would you group ideas, what is the flow going to be? It's very much like composing a piece of music.
Write the back cover and the table of contents. Okay, cool. That's all we got from today. That's a great piece of advice. I love that as someone who's working on a book myself. And I wanted to bring your process up because in reading all your books, I think that you can read it and be like, oh gosh, whatever, this is a lot of stuff to do. It's overwhelming. I'm an artist but the reality is you're actually doing all these things, right? And building this creative lifestyle. And I think it's really great to pivot that against the work that you're doing is, yeah, it's probably really hard to manage this creative spirit that's got all these ideas into projects that do take time, right? Because when you look at your bookshelf, it's like, whatever, this guy's just knocking stuff out every week. He's crazy. But no, it takes time and it takes discipline, especially when you have a lot of thoughts. So thanks for sharing. And I loved in the book, in the new book, I loved all these examples like Kishibashi. Like there's so many amazing examples for each one of your sections of just these little vignettes of how these artists imagined creative livings. And that's really, maybe we should talk about that, is where we're getting in this conversation is what your vision is for how you feel a creative career from its onset can be explored instead of being prescribed.
Yeah, well, a couple of things. First of all, in terms of these vignettes, usually I write about a concept and then have an idea. I want to tell a story about someone who did this and took it 12 steps further. And I really try and feature people from different backgrounds, different regions, but importantly, who are not the rich and famous, right? Because if Bobby McFerrin can do this great thing, or Yo-Yo Ma, or Wynn Marsalis, or whatever, I mean, or Taylor Swift, of course they have all the money in the world, all the resources, all the network in the world. But if someone you've never heard of from the middle of Idaho did this incredible thing, maybe you could too. So I really try to find people that you might not know, but that have just done mind-blowing things. And when you get the right story, it's always way better than anything I could ever come up with.
What's one of your favorites you tripped across?
Oh my gosh, there are so many. I'll tell you one story that was a story that I did not find, and then I went in a different direction. Most of the time I was successful in finding a story that did the thing I was looking for. As musicians, we are way too uncreative, in my opinion, when it comes to audiences, right? To identifying our audiences. And so for like a lot of my background is in classical and jazz music. And so a lot of times the audience is either other musicians and, old white people, the audience that we have traditionally had. Sometimes you'll meet someone who you ask, who's the audience for this? And they'll look at you and get this big grin and they'll say, everyone. Like, we should give them a hand. Like, that is so ambitious. And everyone, understand, is a synonym for no one. When you say my audience is everyone, it means I have not thought about it at all. Obviously, you're not going to turn away anyone at your door, but you're not going to have to, because they're probably not going to come. When you try to be all things to all people, you are nothing to nobody. And then every once in a while, we'll get someone who says, I really want to go after those non-traditional audience. Now, what is a non-traditional audience? Does anyone wake up in the morning and say, today I'm really identifying as a non-traditional? It just doesn't make any sense. And I think what we're saying is we want to capture people that don't normally go to the kind of shows that I produce. But how do you find those people without getting specific? So I wanted to find an example of someone who had, in this case, designed a concert experience specifically for medical doctors, for example, or for lawyers or something like that, that had a targeted product just for a very specific audience. Now, obviously, they fall under everyone, but they're probably not going to hear about it. But when you say, here is a concert experience just for doctors, I mean, how could you not go, right? Or whatever kind of product it is. This is designed for me. In my whole life, I never heard about any concert just celebrating the medical profession. And here it is. Maybe it exists. I could not find any great story like that. So I went in another direction. I started to think about what is the most ignored audience by musicians. What comes to mind for you?
The most ignored audience by musicians. Are we talking about classical musicians or just musicians?
Any musician.
Oh, wow.
I'm quizzing the host.
Oh, no, this is great. This is great. The most ignored audience. Oh, it's not children. What is it?
Not children. That's one that we pay the most attention.
Yeah.
At a time. The deaf and the hard of hearing.
Oh, I read that in your book. Okay, yeah,
right?
okay.
You asked for an example, right?
Yeah.
Because, they can't hear, so why would they want music? But it turns out that people that don't hear so well still like to connect with people and all of the benefits that music has to offer. So I was like, I wonder if I could find someone who solved this problem and did. There's an organization called Deaf Broadway that's put on these productions that just uncovered this whole demographic of people that has been neglected. And so they will, all of the actors are deaf or hard of hearing, and they will lip sync with recordings or make some sounds when they can with recordings, but they utilize not only super titles like a lot of places do, but the problem with super titles is you can't tell who's speaking. And you don't really know. Words can mean so many things. You don't know, is this sarcastic? Is it angry? Is it funny? Is it loving? And so they'll use different colors and different sizes, and they're moving around and things like that, just such a great business model. And they identified their audience and they have a loyal following and have had some great successes.
Mm, yeah, that's incredible. And there's so many things I was wanting to just glom onto what you were just saying that I'm gonna have to just listen back to it. But I loved your idea where you started and said musicians are just they're lacking creativity in how they build their audience development. Also, what you were saying is really the problem solving. This is a big one of your themes, is that you're solving these problems. And hopefully we can touch on quite a few of them today because they're really interesting. Yes, you're solving the audience problem and trying to identify an actual audience of who you want to serve and maybe actually considering who that is, being specific. You have a couple, you say something about, you have a section about starting really small and then scaling and then starting at scale and then going small, these different ways of looking at it. But you also mentioned the problem when you're a creative, whether you're a music teacher, musician, and or just a small business owner. Everything you're saying, when I read your book, it was so funny. As I was reading out, my wife is always just like, she's an actor and she's curious about new things. I was like, Allison, this would be really cool for you to read. It applies to what you're doing, but also what she's doing with this work for a small business. Right. And so not only are musicians, I feel like, lacking creativity in how they approach audience and problem solving, so are business owners too. So I mean, I'm sure this gets you into the other work you do as well. But
In a lot of ways, selling a concert or a recording or a computer or a tube of toothpaste or a summer experience or whatever, it's all the same. You're offering value to people. In some ways, each different act is very specific and unique. But in a lot of ways, everything is transferable. Everything in life is a metaphor. And that's one of the great things that entrepreneurs know is, innovation is rarely about having this aha eureka moment. More often, it's taking an idea from one place and applying it somewhere else. So if you want big ideas, what you have to do is get into unfamiliar territory. I can give you an example that I just came up the other day. This is not about having a big idea. It's just about listening to different people. We were talking to someone who's a photographer, a wedding photographer, and she takes all of these things, and usually she'll take pictures before the wedding, and just like all weddings happen in the United States. Then we had another person who was around who was visiting from Vietnam. And of course, in Vietnam and in China and a lot of places, they have a totally different tradition, which is a month or 2 months before you get married, you go out and take photographs, and then they make these magazine quality books. So that their wedding album is not going to be of the wedding itself. It's going to be of the bride and the groom beforehand looking like supermodels. And that's just normal. That's just what everyone does. But here, nobody does that. So you bring that into your community, there's a non-music example, but you'll just blow everyone away and probably can get a lot of attention from that.
wow, that is awesome. And from that example, you speak a lot about something and I really loved this. You talk about demand a lot. And I was hoping to pick something I've been thinking about a lot lately is and is really what is marketing in my mind as I'm trying to build a product or trying to teach people how to market their studios or their performance businesses is like trying to or speaking to a marketing director, right?
Yeah.
Is what actually is marketing. And I would love to dive into that because I know you discuss it in a really awesome way in this book. But talk to me a little bit about the three types of demand.
Yeah.
That
So let's look at demand and then we'll go to marketing.
yeah.
So demand is really the whole game, right? If you need demand, if you want to get hired for a gig, if you want people to come to your show, you want people to buy your product, you want people to vote for you, you want to get them married, there's going to be demand for you, whatever it is, right? Demand is the whole game. But it's important to understand in which marketplace you live because the rules for creating demand are different depending on the circumstances that surround you. There really are three different marketplaces the way that I see it. So the first question is, and let me say the questions, then I'll give you a solution. So the first question is, how do you create demand when there's a ton of demand? When everyone really wants the thing that you do, and there aren't that many people who do it, how do you make sure that you get the work? Which is pretty easy and not that common. The second question, how do you create demand in a highly competitive marketplace? When everyone does what you do, how do you create demand? Which is quite common and not that easy. And then the third question is, how do you create demand when there is no demand whatsoever? Think about all the places in the world where nobody cares about what you do. Probably that's a lot of places. And that, it turns out, is where the most opportunities might lie if you can just figure out how to tap into it. So let's go back. How do you create demand? When there's a ton of demand, it doesn't mean you're going to get the work just because people need to hire someone doing it. First, you have to be present. People have to know that you exist. So it could mean being present online or present in person or just picking up the phone and reminding people that you exist. So be present. And the second thing is be cool. Because I think even if there's a lot of demand for things, people don't want to work with jerks, with self-impressed narcissists or whatever it is, right? So they would rather leave the job unfilled than just have that kind of misery around them. So be present and be cool, man. Right?
I was really hoping you'd say, I love that. That's a great message. And it's so true because many people don't do it. And so, because you're really talking about the heart of how to actually market yourself and how to get out there. It's like, show up, and be cool. It's a pretty easy, it's a great equation and not that hard. So yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Then you go to the next one, which is, of course, where most musicians live and many businesses live most of the time, which is how do you create demand in a highly competitive marketplace? And my solution to this is be purple. Now, purple, what I mean, this actually is a nod to a book by one of my heroes, Seth Godin, called The Purple Cow. But the idea of being purple is being highly differentiated, right? Just doing something totally different from everyone else. So I have a term that I coined, which is the 97% rule. The 97% rule argues that in just about any industry or any domain, around 97% of people and organizations make surprisingly similar decisions, right? Even in a world of great variety where anything is possible, most people do exactly the same thing. So if you can make just a few decisions that separate you and put you in the 3%, you can thrive. And that's what being purple requires. So we can unpack that a little bit more if you want. And then the last environment is, how do you create demand when there's no demand whatsoever? And the key to doing this is to be valuable, to fill a gap. If people don't care about what it is that you're doing, figure out what they do care about and connect your art to that thing. And of course, art is a superpower, especially in places where it isn't usually received. So if you can just get people excited about it and excited about your vision because it connects to theirs, all kinds of doors can open up.
Yeah,
so that's a little bit about demand.
Yeah, I really loved that third spot you were talking about because I feel like even if you were in, let's say you're a music teacher, you're starting a music school, or you're just beginning a career in a maybe a secondary market where it feels like nobody's into what you're doing because that's something, and you're thinking, oh gosh, I wish I lived in New York. I wish and you speak to that too. I wish I were here. Wish people just aren't interested in what I'm doing. And the demand actually is there. You're uncovering it, and there's like an educational piece to it. I loved the simplicity of you're in this environment where it feels like people aren't wanting what you're offering. But such a big part of it is to be valuable and to be impactful and to start selling your vision to that community. And it can really be done. And you might need to twist it around. You might need to try different things, but it's right there. And I loved how you outlined those three.
Thank you. Yeah, so much of the time we just talk about what's important to me. We present it from my perspective. And of course, your perspective as the artist is interesting, but other people are thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about you. It's just human nature. So to figure out, there's a great story. Do you know Ben Zander, conductor?
Oh, yeah.
Who wrote a book called The Art of Possibility. And he tells a story in there about shoe salesman travels to some country in Africa. And he looks around and notices nobody's wearing shoes. So he gives up and goes home. I mean, nobody wears shoes. What am I going to do here? This is a fool's errand. So they send another person who goes there, and he looks around and he notices nobody's wearing shoes. Eureka, this is a goldmine of opportunity, because he knows shoes are amazing. And if you have a whole population that hasn't done it, if they can just see the value, and if you can connect in a way that they care about it, like you have a monopoly on their attention. And the same way for your example, let's say you're a music teacher and you move into a rural community, and there is not a tradition of playing the violin or whatever it is that you happen to do. But the violin's amazing. And if you can just somehow connect with the people who are there, you're going to have a full studio within a week and a half, as long as you are being valuable and connecting to what gets them excited or motivated.
Yeah, and I like connecting what you were saying to you had this Venn diagram throughout your book. And these are things that you've been talking about since we first met. And I think I know that I've glommed onto them. And they've become a big part of what I share with people too, is this idea of where innovation actually comes from and the impact. And that's something that I think you may have first turned me on to that became such a big guiding principle, is how can I impact this community? And yeah, the income thing and the inspiration, those are your three circles. And at the center of that Venn diagram, that's where innovation can happen. You have to eat. Yeah. You have to support yourself. And I guess I'm so excited to talk to you about it, because the energy of this conversation, it's something that honestly we kind of run into a lot of in the musician community. There's still, I think, a lot of growth has happened in the last 10 years. And I have a very strong belief that right now, and I think I've been talking about this a lot, is just talking with other startup founders in the tech community, is they are mad about creative spirits, right? And they feel for their kids, while they're telling everybody else, don't go to college, don't study the humanities, for God's sakes, study finance, but they're wanting their kids to study philosophy, classical music, poetry, because these are the skills that will become at the center of, in a business world, marketing, product development, solutions, but also humanity, which, as everything else is being automated, it's actually a huge benefit to the creative spirit, because has to be at the heart of all this stuff. And so the work that you're doing, and this energy in this book, by reading it, hopefully the people that are listening, if you're in the space of, I'll never make a great living, why am I doing this? Maybe I should just get a day job, or it'd be so much easier to get a day job, or I just can't get started. I don't have an entrepreneurial mindset. It's almost an energy that you can pick up piece by piece. We're talking about a lot of things, but any one of these things you can change today. And so that's what I loved about your book, and that's why I wanted to jump around to the topics a little bit and be like, oh, here's this Venn diagram that you discussed, because they're all things that you can instill and carry around with you and play with and have an immediate impact in kind of your day-to-day existence. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I use the word, you just were talking about the day job. I use that a little differently. I think for most musicians, when we talk about a day job, that's my non-music job, right? That's what I'm doing during the day. And then to support my hobby or my habit or whatever it is at nighttime. For me, the way I use that word, a day job is the one you hate, right? It could be in music, it could be out of music, but it's the one where it just, your life expectancy goes down every time you're there. And as soon as you get to work, you're just counting down the minutes until work ends and life begins. So it is a very negative force in your life. And then there's another category of job, I call it the transition job. And a transition job, the idea is that this might not be the ultimate, but it's teaching you a skill. It's helping give you something that will move you to the next place. And then the third kind of job is the dream job, right? This is the one where you pinch yourself. Like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. So your life expectancy gets longer each time you go to work, because you get to play. You get to do that thing you love. But the thing that's really interesting is that these jobs can trade places, or one position. You could start something. You could start working at Starbucks as a day job, and then meet someone who's really influential and helps bring you somewhere else. Or, develop a skill in just talking to people that turns out to transition you to better things. you could start out in a transition role. I'm going to work in this marketing company, but I really want to do this other thing. And then it maybe becomes the dream. I just love this. I'm going to do this all of my life. And then there are people that, the dream is to get in an orchestra, for example. And so they work and they work and they work. And one day they get into an orchestra and they wind up hating it. I'm not talking about the people that love playing in the orchestra. Then it's a dream job. I'm talking about the people that don't. And there are definitely people that work in orchestras that it's not creative, right? Everyone's picking the music for you. It's, you have to, your bow has to match up perfectly. You're like a robot. Some people feel that way. I'm overstating the case, right? But some people feel that way. And so what once was a dream job becomes a day job. And so you have to, figure out where you are in life and what you want to get out of every opportunity. But if you have a day job in that sense, most, but not all, most day jobs also pay very poorly. And if you have a bad paying day job, just quit, do something else. You can have a transition or a dream job that may not pay that well, but gives you more in life than a bad paying day job. If you have a great paying day job, that's a little bit harder calculus, right? Because financially it's helping you out, but it's making your life shorter. So you have a harder choice in that case.
Yeah. And I became really thoughtful in reading about those three types of jobs, and there's pieces of each. And it's really important. Only you can be honest with yourself. Like you said, you get to this orchestra gig you've dreamt of your whole life. You've put so many hours in, and you get there and you're like, this sucks. And we've all known people like that you achieve the thing and it doesn't bring you the happiness that you thought it would. And it can create a crisis.
Yeah.
But if you're honest with yourself, there's a through line. And this is the recurring theme of every single person that I talk to, is that the great things happen from these little moments. Like I walked into your keynote speech and then we cornered each other afterwards and a friendship develops and all these great things happen. And you're here, but it's very rarely from a calculated approach. And you need to have that calculated approach as a discipline. I'm going to promote myself or whatever. But I wanted to ask you one thing. Like, let's just say that I'm a musician and I do really want to do, and I love this. But let's say I'm really afraid of sales. Let's say I'm afraid to send the email out that I have a gig because this is a real common feeling that whether it's a self-confidence issue or a discipline issue, because over my years, you see a lot of people that may have less talent up front who are fearless. They don't care about being cringy, as our kids call it. They just go through that cringe phase until they reach the level where they have an audience and people are coming.
Yeah.
Would that be, here I am working towards my dream job of being a full-time creative and this thing holding me back? Would that piece of it, how do you determine when you try to either farm it out or when you just suck it up and say, this is the day job part of my dream job that I need to develop? Because I think that's the thing that holds so many people back, is like one little cog, that they can't do.
That one issue in your life. So, when you were saying that, it made me think of like SWOT diagrams, which is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Although I look at them, it's just like an O diagram because they're all opportunities. But a strength, the easy thing is to, amplify your strengths. But you're talking about a weakness, right? What if your weakness is, this is, an internal weakness, is that I'm not good at sales? There are different things you can do with any weakness. One is you can overcome it, right? I'm not really that good at it, but I'm going to get better. One is you can outsource it. You can say, well, this isn't something I'm going to do, but I'm going to hire someone else to do it. So instead of paying with my time and my aggravation, I'll pay with my money to get someone else to do that. Another thing you can do is you can just omit it from your model. Now that's a little hard when it's sales is the example, right? But if you have a weakness and you're like, I'm just not that good at this thing, you can just say, we don't do this. I know a lot of my competitors do this thing, but it's just not part of my model. And the other thing you can do is own it and make it be your calling card. The most important thing, we find our place in life either because of or despite the hand that we've been dealt. The reason that I am in this particular world, I'm also a pianist and a composer and all those things, but I'm known largely in the world of entrepreneurship and the likes, it's not because I had all the answers, it's because I had none of the answers. It's because that was my existential threat, which is I did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do and then couldn't figure out what to do with it because I was so focused on my art at the expense of my business. So I went to all these great schools and won all these great awards and did all of these things that the gospel of being an artist suggests that you should do. And then I got to the other end and I looked around and I saw a world from where I stood where my background, classical music was dead, jazz was irrelevant. And I just felt like my life had been a lie. And that was a really tricky period for me. When I came out of that, it was with a sense of determination that I was going to somehow solve my life. I didn't really know how to do it. I had a few ideas. But the important point I want to make here is that was my existential threat. And that's what brought me to this moment. So part of me coming to music was because I was talented and worked hard. So because of a strength helped get me here. But the other part of it, in terms of entrepreneurship, that was my weakness. That's where I didn't know what to do. And that also helped me find my future. And that happens with everyone. So pay attention. If something is really hard for you, I don't mean a little tricky for you, but I mean, if it's the bane of your existence, it could just be the opportunity of a lifetime. And, so many people and I don't wish this on anyone, but, that it's the tragic thing that happens in their life that opens up the world to them. And that's how they find their calling.
And their community. Yeah. That is, from what you just said, there's 100 things that come to mind. I really, again, want to reiterate, it's about paying attention.
Yeah.
It's about experiencing seasons and being present to them, because we do have these big failures. We have these disappointments. You've worked so hard to get to this thing and it didn't turn out the way you wanted. Being honest with yourself. I mean, so much of being entrepreneurial is being human. And that's part of embracing it. For you, you always seem to share this mindset seems to be a massive part of your approach, which is, I'm trying to peel it apart. It's mindset, but you also, I don't know whether, I guess a good question to ask is, do you have a switch between artist and thinking more back in when you were talking about your music, was it artist David and business David, or did those two things become one over time? Because now it seems like you're comfortable being in both those entities as one thing, because they are one thing. But for a lot of people, they avoid it.
Yeah, everything's the same. And actually, musicians, a lot of the skills that help you be a great musician can help you be a great business person. You can just make the connection. That was actually when I went through my crisis, when I came out, that was my one idea, my only idea, which is, could I take the things that I learned in music or that I know through music and apply them towards other areas of life? Like, I knew how to be passionate about practicing. Could I learn to be passionate about personal finance? I knew how to arrange a tune. Could I arrange a marketing campaign? So can I take what I already know how to do and just apply it in this other situation? I just want to point out the thing you just said, which was so savvy, on paying attention. I know it sounds a little bit hoo-hoo, but as I've gotten older, I've gotten really leaned into this idea of pay attention to the universe. And I think it's really important to have plans, actually, to not just like wing it all the time. You have to be flexible at the plans, have maybe a very concrete plan, and be willing to leave any part of it. But then pay attention to the universe and see what it's trying to tell you. So what often I see happening is someone will have an idea about what to do with their life, what to do with a project, something like that. And then someone will say, hey, have you considered this other angle, this other approach? And the response is, no, let me tell you what my idea is, right? So this becomes a moment to explain and clarify my vision. Maybe instead, this should be a moment of listening and reflecting and to seeing, maybe you just gave me a clue, a free hint that could change my world if only I could be open to it. So I always think when people say, have you considered this? Almost my role is don't respond. Just say, wow, I'm going to think about that. Doesn't mean that everything that everyone says is the right solution for you. But when, the problem is we are like too close to the trees. It's very hard to be objective about ourselves because we just don't have that perspective. And when someone else looks at the problem from the outside, they often can spot very different things. They won't have the intimate knowledge of the situation that you have, but they can find something else. I remember I interviewed, I didn't interview, sorry, I was talking to a bassoonist one time, and he had no idea what to do with his life. And I was like, well, what are the opportunities that are, what's out there for bassoonists? He said, well, orchestra, college teaching, write journal articles. How are you going to make money writing journal articles? And making and selling double reeds. So those were his 4 ideas for the future. Then there was a singer who was sitting there who didn't know really what a bassoon was. But I asked the singer, what career opportunities are there for a bassoonist? And it was amazing. She had 40 different ideas that the bassoonist couldn't see, but as someone looking from outside, she had so many more possibilities. It's just like anytime in life, you said there are 2 kinds of people, here are another 2 kinds of people, right? Not just people who get things done, people who don't get things done. There are people with 100 ideas or 1,000 ideas about what they could do. And then there are people with 1 or 2 or maybe 0 ideas about what the future could hold. But you never really meet someone who has 7 ideas or something like that. It just has never happened in the history of the world. Either opportunity is everywhere or there's only one way to solve this problem.
I'd add in a third type, which is the most common type, which is the person who is so adept at pointing out things to complain about what's wrong. The complainer, which is the kvetcher and then, without the ideas, with no ideas. And that's it's a really tough one and a common one. And again, I think this all is just how you view your life and attachment. I love what you said about make a plan, make a roadmap, and work hard. That's the thing. You have this life. It's not, no one's saying this is an easy career, but they're saying there's huge possibilities and it can be really joyful. But make that roadmap, adhere to it, develop discipline, just like you did around your practicing about growing a business and impacting your community, but also don't hold it loosely. If another opportunity pops, before Fawn started, I was really happy with my private studio in Seattle. I'd written this book. I was raising my family. I was living, having a great time. And I always assumed I was going to go to law school or go to get an MBA. That was like the plan and I'd always wanted to do that. And then I never thought for a moment I'd start a tech company. Right. Yeah. But I literally started to do the thing. I said, universe, I'm paying attention. Yeah. But I'm kind of feeling like I need to be doing something different right now. I need a new learning opportunity. And it wasn't 7 weeks later, I was, funded and in my first formation of a team, just getting beat up by all these engineers and designers, getting ready to start a tech company, knowing nothing about it. Wow. And that journey, every single day I applied how I would learn a Bach fugue on guitar to how I learned about how to run a tech team or how to deal with lawyers or, how to do all those things apply in a really beautiful way. And it keeps coming back to my kind of personal thesis is that I think over the next 5-10 years, people like you, people like that are creative and that have done the time to learn the craft, right? It's no one can take away the thousands of hours that we practiced, right? Who have honed our mind to think that way and then to see the world with a positive outlook. Because I think that's a big part of what you're saying. Everything you're saying is, I can turn this into something. That weakness, I can see that as a strength. Is moving forward with that. I think this is going to be our time across multiple industries.
Well, I love what you were saying, about the idea of the person who's super creative at coming up with problems. And if you can which is actually a great skill. And by the way, that level of critique is something that we do well as musicians and is valuable in terms of making an idea stronger. But if you are so creative at critiquing things, if you can just flip that and go in the upside down world or the downside up world or something like that, then all of a sudden, maybe that's the way to start spotting opportunities. So I never thought of it like that way. Creativity and finding problems.
Yeah, you took my gripe and you actually flipped it into an opportunity. There you go, doing your own thing. That's
Here it
awesome.
is. I wanted to say, you're talking about working hard, and working hard is really important, but so is working smart.
Mm.
And so, one of the things we think about a lot as musicians or as anyone is, of course, time management. And there are a lot of great time management techniques, and those are important, but there are other sources for that. But what I've started thinking a lot more about is project management. And what I mean by that is not just how do you manage a project, but how do you choose which projects to manage, right? So life is, I'm an innovator to my core, and yet I have not figured out how to put it more than 24 hours in a day or 7 days in a week. You can't do it unless you're flying to a different time zone, the right direction, right, to make the day longer. And so to be very strategic so that if you are going to invest in a project, whatever that means to you, that it is really going to be something that you are going to leverage and that can grow and that can be amplified and can help take you to the next place. Because what I think happens to a lot of us in the musical world or the arts world and a lot of other worlds too, is we just say, yes, this, yes, yes. And we're doing a lot of things, but we're not getting anything done because every project dilutes our overall effort instead of builds something bigger. So I think about interlocking projects. How can you pick it so that this project fits with this project, fits with this project, so that you're owning a special space in the universe as opposed to just, just trying everything, fishing in every pond.
Gosh, and that's a really interesting way to talk about prioritization or to look at, because prioritization is everything, right? Choosing how you're going to allocate your energy or your hours of the day, as you said.
Totally.
But does this project, am I saying yes to it because I'm like, oh, I can do this and I need something to do and this is, or is this project mindfully a way that I could move forward? Maybe it's something I don't like a lot, but we talked about earlier, maybe I'll take this sales gig
Yeah.
working for the Seattle Symphony, selling subscriptions to become better at sales, even though I don't like it. Or, that project would be meaningful if it were to grow my ability in this area that I'm uncomfortable with. But
I
it's
would guess, if you say yes to a project, make it meaningful. Don't make
yeah.
it a day job. Make it meaningful. But
Mm,
before you accept the project, to really think, and this is why, if you can have a long-term vision and you know what you're trying to build, that's, I think, one thing a lot of musicians do is they just like work, 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 do this, but there's no vision. So they don't know what's the best case scenario. What does success look like 10 years from now, and then reverse engineer whatever that vision is.
right the back of the book.
Yep. Yeah. Right. That's beautiful. Write the back of the book cover of your autobiography. What is it going to look like? Or write your obituary is a darker way to,
Oh,
think about it. But what is it that you really, want to achieve in this blessing in this short amount of time that we have here on this planet? And then figure out how to build that. So, I mean, it seems kind of obvious that if there are two projects and one could get you this far, project A, and project B could get you this far, you should take project B. But what I find is so often people do the opposite thing, right? An esoteric journal article that will be read by like 3 people and their mom at the expense of writing the book that would change the world, right?
Mm.
They wind up pursuing some concert. How long does it take to make a concert? I don't know, but whatever it is, let's say it takes X amount of hours. You could design a concert that winds up impacting 30 people, or you could do one that impacts 3,000 people. And you have to have a different strategy for it, but it's not harder to learn the music for one over the other. It doesn't mean if you want to impact 3,000 people that you have to sell your soul to the devil and not be true to who you are as an artist. But it does mean you have to create a vision that will engage folks. And so a lot of times what happens is people, I just did something at my university, one of my university classes was a project where a lot of our students have summer jobs because they got to make some money. And so they work at, Target or something like that. And they make minimum wage, or maybe they're a manager, maybe they make a little bit more than that. And so we would calculate, all right, how many hours are you spending over the summer in doing this? How much money are you making over the summer in 12 weeks of summer? So maybe they're working 30 hours per week and then they're exhausted when they get home. How much do they make? How much time do they spend? Now, what if you could make more money than that? How would you make more money than that using your art form to do something that you love that will actually make an impact more than working at Target would in fewer hours? And there's almost, including the marketing, including all of those things, there's almost always a solution to that. But you have to think creatively. And so most people, my point here is that many people will choose working in the Target over making a project that would sell, that would negate the need to work at a Target, right? Because these are short-term solutions, and they're both kind of short-term solutions in this case, but it's short-term thinking as opposed to strategic thinking.
Mm, yes, and to your point about there are people that get things done and people who don't. The same thing. It's about switching on that mindset, right? And I think you really embody that. And I think for a lot of people, it's difficult to make that switch. It's almost easier to just take the easy, oh, I'll just do this job. It's going to be a lot of work. By the time I get everything up and running, the summer will have to be halfway over. When it's not true, you have to do it and apply that creativity. And hopefully, I'm really hoping that there's some good curmudgeons listening to this, who maybe came in, they're like, oh my gosh, here's a bunch of
Mr. Scrooge.
just a bunch of like, they're going to probably, they'd hug if they were in person. It's like there's some incense burning or whatever. Who are these guys? But it's so true because I have a ton of artist friends like that. And I love them dearly. We listen to Tom Waits, do our thing together. It's awesome. But this doesn't detract from your creative value, but it massively changes the amount of output you have, right?
Yeah.
Into whatever that is. And it's really about self-reflection. So, I really want to lean into your discussion about mindset and shifting that and seeing opportunity everywhere because it's so much fun and it's actually easy to turn on. And
Yeah.
once you start it, it creates a flywheel,
Yeah.
right? And you're driven by curiosity and you've got energy and you found something that didn't work and when something doesn't work, you're like, oh, that's an opportunity to do this differently or turn that over. So I think that this conversation and your book, which there's going to be a link here to pick up, and I highly encourage everybody to read it, is a great catalyst for either if you're killing it and you need to refine it, but also and grow. But if you're really feeling stuck, because at the end of the day, it might drive you in a different direction to explore something totally different than what you think you're doing. So that's brilliant. And thanks for sharing it.
Of course. Of course. A lot of people just, there is risk to leadership. There's risk to doing things differently than other people have before because there's not a proven model. So there is risk to that. And I understand that's scary for a lot of people. But what has, from my perspective, often a lot more risk is doing what everyone else is doing the thing you're supposed to do. Because one thing we know in a world that is changing at an exponential rate, what got you here won't get you there. And doing what everyone else does is almost the riskiest. It's like playing the lottery, right? To take the same staircases or the same roads and the same techniques. To me, that is super risky. So I think a lot of people, I didn't actually put this in the book, but a lot of people, get nervous about failure. In fact, a lot of musicians have this perfectionist mentality, which is good for certain things and can destroy your life in a lot of other ways. But the problem with perfectionists is not that they're bad people. It's just they don't want to make a mistake. And you have to make mistakes to grow. Imagine if we didn't allow our toddlers to fall when they were walking. They'd never learn to walk. And so there are two types of failures. I call them type A and type B. So a type A failure is you try something and it doesn't work. And a type B failure is you don't try something and it doesn't work, right? So type A, you apply for a grant and you don't get it. Type B, you don't apply for the grant and you don't get it. And in my experience, most successful, savvy musicians or people have a lot of type A failures, although maybe less than you would think, because they're out there and things actually start working. Most bitter musicians, less successful musicians have very few type A failures and a huge type B one, which is they never really went for it. They never made it happen. And you said mindset a few times, and mindset is important, but it's not the whole game, right? You have to match mindset with strategy and vision. And it's not going to happen by accident, but the accidental things will be amazing and need to become part of your model.
You have to position yourself in the universe with your glove open, waiting for that pitch to come to you, right?
Yeah. You got to set the GPS, but then maybe you'll get on a detour and that can become your new direction as opposed to just prayer.
Well, and if you just kind of wrapping this up a little bit, because I want to take a little bit of time just to hear about what you're doing right now and what's coming up. But if you were to be giving a first piece of advice to someone on this journey, and it could be someone who's just, say, graduating from music school and they're listening to this and they're like, wow, I'm excited. Or if they've been doing it a long time and they're thinking about really pivoting into something else, they're feeling burned out. Where would you start? Like, what's the first thing that you would recommend someone doing? Because we talked about a lot of things today and where's the first place you would dig in if you were guiding someone?
One thing is a game I created. I call it Those Three Things. And the idea is to identify what are the top three, maybe when you're thinking about your career, what are the top three most important things to you? And not 4 and not 2. It has to be 3. And then once you can come up with that, rank those 3. So you figure this is the most important thing, and the second most important thing, and a third most important thing. I'm pretty sure there is a career model for you that can make those happen. But it's really interesting to think about, what's more important? Is having a career where I can have a family more important, or making lots of money more important, right? Is being able to travel the world more important, or having the stability of being in one place more important? Does it have to be music, or is it more about the outcome? Do I want to be a transformational leader where maybe I use music sometime, and maybe I have some projects that don't even deal with music, but they help me get this result. So I think under defining success, you mentioned, my success formula that I introduced in here, but just to put that together, this Venn diagram is something I call I3, which is, I call it a success formula. I would never tell someone what to do with their life, because I don't know, it's your life. You got to make decisions and live with them. So I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but this is just a framework that I look at when I wonder, even for my own life, am I being successful? And so you mentioned these points, but let me just go into a little more detail. So it's the intersection of these 3 concepts that all begin with the letter I. In no particular order. One is income. Money is not everything, but money is important, right? If you want to fix your instrument, if you want to have lunch every once in a while, you got to have some money. It costs something. Doesn't mean that you have to make all the money in the world, but you got to make enough to be able to do whatever your dreams are. Another one is impact, right? Hopefully you're involved with the arts because you want to make a positive difference on the world around you. Now, especially if you're self-employed or an entrepreneur or something like this, one thing is that these two should be inextricably linked and hopefully go up together. So if you want to make more money, here is a strategy. Either make more impact, right? Impact more people, or impact the same amount of people on a deeper level, right? Change their life even more drastically. If, on the other hand, you're already making more impact, make sure it is matched to a sound financial model. And then inspiration is the third I. Most people start up in the arts because it's something that they love. So if you ever fall out of love, if you hate what you do, you're making lots of money, lots of impact, and it becomes a day job, that can't be success. And so figure out, what would that actually look like? What's enough money? What kind of impact do I want to make? What will it take to keep me inspired? And once you have that model, then you can figure out what to do. But there are a lot of career models that come gift wrapped with a bow that will tell you exactly what to do, which is why I drew that big circle around it, which is for the fourth I innovation. You're probably going to have to become a creative problem solver and invent your own path.
Mm, just sit with that. That's a great stopping point, I feel like, because that's the thing, right? And I think that advice is so great. You're not telling people what to do because you can't. But at the end of the day, you're probably going to have to, if you're willing to be one of those people who do things, you're going to create and innovate that path for yourself, reflect what's important to you. And I think it's really great that you mentioned that there are a lot of gigs that you could get that mean, yeah, you can't have a family, you won't have time to go on vacation, you'll work 7 days a week. Yeah, you can make a lot of money, but you might be miserable. Maybe that is your thing. But crafting out something that's uniquely your own. And I actually hope that a lot of people listen to this chat that aren't musicians, right? I feel like anyone could
All the
listen to
same.
this and really grasp onto it because this applies to everything in our life. So I thank you so much for being here and for sharing and talking about your book. There's going to be a link below where people can pick that up. And so what are you excited about next? Before we jump off, I just wanted to kind of wrap things up with like, what's next in the Cutlerverse?
Oh, there are a lot of exciting things that
I
are,
had a feeling. Yeah.
I just got back from a cultural diplomacy project where I was in, of all places, northern Iraq and Lebanon, working in a music program there in a part of the world where they really need it. And it was so beautiful, cultural diplomacy in the truest sense, where it wasn't just us coming in and sharing the answers. We learned so much from them. And I only hope that they learned a portion of that from what we did. But it was really a win-win, give, present kind of situation. So that's
What kind of
really,
music was this? Just really, because Iraq has a big classical Western music heritage.
yeah, there was an orchestra program there, and I directed. The composers were, I don't really care about the style, but
yeah.
I guess more like
Well, I'm just
Western
interested.
classical music. But many of them wanted to borrow from Kurdish melodies and integrate those kinds of things into what they were doing. But several of them wrote for orchestra. They wrote for a chamber composers
Did you
ensemble.
get to play any other instruments or learn any, like
And
saws or?
no, they don't have that many. There's one string instrument we saw a bit, but they don't have that many other instruments that just came from there. But my son, who's a senior in high school, is a clarinetist. So last visit, we actually went to Iraq 2 years in a row. The
Oh,
first year, we also went to Turkey, and he bought, any of you that know the woodwind world, he bought this thing called clarinet in G, which is not a common relative of the clarinet in this country. They're usually in
okay.
the key of B flat or A, but a Turkish clarinet is in G and it has a very sultry tone. And so that was a very interesting instrument from the region, just beautiful sound.
How long were you there?
So they're about 3 weeks this time. So we were going to go to Syria too. I really want to go to Syria, but it's a little bit too dangerous at the moment. But people were so nervous beforehand. On the State Department, it says, do not go there. It's level 4. You're going to get kidnapped. You're going to get shot. And if you do have to go, just before you go, just do this one thing for us. Make sure your will is up to date and that you've made alternative arrangements for your kids in the unfortunate instance you are not able to return. Just terrifying. Truth of the matter is, felt so safe there. The biggest danger is overeating because the food was really, really good. But yeah, so much safer than in any city in the United States. But we almost couldn't go because there were missiles that were, because Iraq is right in between Iran and Israel. So they had missiles going right over where we were. So we almost couldn't go because they closed all the airspace. But then we went.
Was this you and your son went?
My son came along too, and he was kind of an intern with this program, and really defining experience, I think, for him. It's really shaped his world.
What's that program called?
It's through an organization called American Voices. Our program's called Yes Academy. So
Wow.
Anyway, that was awesome.
And is that something you do every year? Is that something you'll continue?
Something that I have done for 2 years, and we'll see how it goes from here. And also, there are lots of changes in the cultural diplomacy world.
Gotcha.
But they're talking about they've done this program over the years in many different places, and they're talking about offering some more of this in Latin America and some different places in the world.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's really beautiful, meaningful work. So that was one thing. And I'm working on a new book now, which is also on innovation and also on music. But this book, my other books are on the business side, the entrepreneurship side, that kind of innovation. This is on the art side. And without going into the whole thing, it's called Creative Performance Practice. It's specifically geared towards classical musicians. And, the way that classical music usually works is you're given this score that's like the answer key. And it tells you all the notes and rhythms and dynamics and articulations that you must play. And your job is to realize the intent of a composer in a stylistically correct method. It's a great approach. I mean, it's changed my life. I think it's really wonderful, but it is not the only approach. And one of the problems of this way of working, not only aren't classical musicians taught to innovate, but we are often taught to not innovate, right? Because you just have to play that score. And if there's any room for creativity at all, it's minor tinkering around the edges as opposed to radical reimagination. So this book is called Creative Performance Practice. It's not a better way, it's just a different way of playing that music where the score is viewed instead of the endpoint as the launch pad, right? As you get this score and you get to decide, music making becomes more of a collaboration between two creative geniuses, the performer and the composer. So when it's in your hands, you get to decide what elements do you want to keep and what do you want to tweak? How can you take a piece of music, in some cases that's been performed tens of thousands of times before, and make it distinctly your own, so even a lay listener could never confuse it with all of the other versions that are out there?
Oh, that sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to that one.
That's a fun project, but in a way it's a very different topic. In a way it's exactly the same topic.
I was just going to say that it sounds like you're applying the same principles just to your creative practice. That's awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for being here. This was an amazing chat. I hope to have you on again and hear more about what you're doing. It's so good to catch up. I hope to see you soon. Thank you for being here.
Have a visit anytime.
Will do. Thanks again, David. Appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thanks for all you do and all your innovation inspiring.
Thanks again. You've been listening to the 440 podcast. If you found this helpful, subscribe at Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a quick rating. It makes a big difference. To learn more about how to run your teaching studio with less stress and more joy, visit fonz.com. I'm Eric Branner. Thanks for being here.